The White House has not let go of its focus on a potential acquisition of Greenland, though any plans on how to act next remain unclear. A previous statement from Trump's press secretary saying military action was being considered has been dismissed by House Speaker Mike Johnson. Meanwhile, ahead of a meeting with Denmark officials next week, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said President Donald Trump intends to buy, not invade the island. Gabrielle Nadler and Charlotte Hughes have the story.
There likely won't be boots on the ground in Greenland, according to U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson. After White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said military action in the semi-autonomous territory was on the table, Johnson dismissed the statement Wednesday.
I don't think anybody's talking about using military force in Greenland. They're looking at diplomatic channels on all
The White House said they're keeping military options there open.
The U.S. always has military options for everything.
The White House has since said that diplomacy is its first option, though it is open to all others. President Donald Trump also appears to be contradicting himself. Despite threats to take over Greenland, a NATO ally, he affirmed lasting U.S. support for the military alliance in a Truth Social post Wednesday.
I doubt NATO will be there for us if we really need them. We will always be there for NATO, even if they won't be there for us.
Greenland falls under the protection of NATO since its defense and foreign policy remain in the hands of Denmark, a member of the alliance. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has cautioned that Trump taking over the territory will bring an end to NATO. Danish officials are set to meet next week for talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who recently said Trump plans to buy Greenland rather than invade the island.
I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then.
Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term.
The plan to buy Greenland has already been strongly rejected by politicians in both Greenland and Denmark, who say the territory is not for sale.
Well, to talk more about this story, I'm joined now by Mikaa Blugeon-Mered, who's a senior researcher in hydrogen, Greenland geopolitics at the Canada Chair in Clean Hydrogen. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, we've seen that rhetoric really ramp up over the last few days in the US around acquiring Greenland. How do people in Greenland feel about all of this?
Really bad. I mean, imagine you're doing nothing, you're trying to live peacefully, you want to develop your economy in order to become independent at some point, and then someone comes in and says, I'm going to buy you. And then like 5 years later, the same person comes in and says, no, I'm not going to buy you, I'm going to grab you. And just 1 year later says, well, yeah, I'm not excluding using the military to do that. So definitely, you can imagine how our Greenlandic friends are feeling now.
And remind us then why this island is strategic and why it is so important in the eyes of Donald Trump.
Well, in the eyes of the world, in fact, because the reason why Donald Trump is doing this, we have to go back to understand the full extent of what's happening. We have to go back to 2018, 2019. In his first term, Donald Trump basically sees the Arctic as this place where there's a lot of competition emerging. And amongst the Arctic, there's, of course, Greenland. And the reason why Greenland was so strategic, well, there's a military and geostrategic reason, meaning that Greenland, by the way it's geographically positioned, is perfectly suited to help whoever controls Greenland, the Europeans, the Americans, NATO, all of them together, to control then the Arctic as well, or at least have a better understanding and better options engaging in the Arctic to peacefully develop whatever in the Arctic, economic activities or something else. So that's the strategic part. And then there's the economic part, and that is due primarily to two things. One, fishing. That's not what Donald Trump talks about, but it's worth talking about it because it's important for the Greenlanders. Basically, as climate change rises, fish go up north, and the Greenlandic waters become more and more strategic in that area of business. And then the second part is all the mineral and hydrocarbon resources that are thought to be hosted on the Greenland territory or in their waters. And if you basically try to understand what's happening in this field, the more we develop globally AI, the more we use robots, the more we use space as well, the outer space, the more we will need the strategic minerals that are actually located in Greenland and on which, outside of Greenland, China has a monopoly on, mostly. So basically, when Chinese companies came into Greenland in 2014, 15, all the way to 2018, 19, Donald Trump was like, oh, we got to do something about it. And the Danes agreed on that too. So they did something about it. They managed to get the Chinese out of Greenland since 2021. And now, well, there's no reason actually for Donald Trump to come and say, yeah, I'm going to annex Greenland. He could do whatever he wants, get his strategic goals for the US without annexing the territory.
On the Chinese interest in Greenland, let's talk about that, because Donald Trump has said that Chinese ships are surrounding the island. That's not exactly true, is it?
It's completely false. It's completely false. Basically, yeah, he said on Air Force One on Sunday night, yeah, the Chinese and the Russian ships are all over the place around Greenland. So that's not true. And that's not been true for like years. What I mean by that is in 2018, 2019, when the Chinese were in and trying to develop the first uranium and rare earth elements mine in the southern part of Greenland, yes, there was kind of a lot of activity. And if that mine had to take place and be built and be exploited, basically the Chinese vessels would be more and more numerous in this area, trying to get the minerals exploited in Greenland all the way to China to be processed there and sold to the global market. So back in 2018-19, when Donald Trump said for the first time in August 2019, I want to buy Greenland, it kind of makes sense. It kind of made sense. But now, as I said, the Chinese are no longer in Greenland. The only business they're trying to do in Greenland now is related to fishing, and they're not fishing themselves. They're buying fish products from the Greenlanders and the Danes. They're trying to develop tourism as well, but that's the same thing. It's not a strategic industry such as minerals exploitation. So the Chinese are no longer there. And Donald Trump also mentioned the Russians being all over the place. In 2019, the Russian government tried to perform a circumnavigation of Greenland, meaning have one of their icebreakers, state-owned icebreakers, do basically like a journey all around Greenland, which would have been helpful for the Russians to actually map the seabed around Greenland. So that effectively was a time, 2019, 2018, when these guys were there. They're not. And Vladimir Putin, in fact, said just last month, if Trump wants to have Greenland, I'm fine with that.
And we're talking all about this now because there's a sense of heightened nervousness after the US's stunning raid to capture Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. But it's kind of hard to compare the two situations. You know, we've got, in the one situation, the US is interested in really extracting one leader, decapitating what it sees as an illegitimate regime. And in the other, you know, the US actually has military bases on Greenland.
That's right. And they have a defense agreement with Denmark and with Greenland de facto that enables them, if they so wish, to actually expand their presence, to reopen former bases that they had on Greenland, in Greenland. And so basically, even on the strategic, as in the military aspect of things, Donald Trump doesn't need at all to annex Greenland. Right now, there's only one US base, the space base called Pitufik in the northwestern part of Greenland. Basically, this base hosts only 150 personnel. And it has a very dedicated approach, basically they're connecting space to what's happening on the ground in the Arctic, to make it simple. By the time of the Cold War, during the Cold War, the height of the Cold War, the US had more than 6,000 personnel all over Greenland. So you see the difference between then and now. So the US, as part of that pact, the defense agreement from 1951, they can go back to having like 6,000 personnel, if they so wish, in Greenland. They can go back and reopen all the 17 bases that they used to have if they want to. But they have to discuss that with the Danes, with the Greenlanders, and with NATO, because that's within NATO apparatus, within NATO umbrella. And what we see is that Donald Trump doesn't want to talk with anybody. He wants to do stuff by himself, based on his interests.
Well, let's talk about NATO because, again, we've seen comments regarding NATO from Donald Trump get a little bit more aggressive in the last day or two, you know, saying that we would do anything for NATO, but they wouldn't do anything for us. What extent, first of all, would NATO go to protect Greenland as it stands now? And what are these threats doing to the alliance Are they damaging the alliance already?
They are damaging their alliance already because they are decredibilising, they are deuniting simply the alliance as it is. They're trying to basically say, they being Donald Trump and his first circle, they're saying NATO will not come and save us. Hey, I mean, of all the NATO allies, Denmark is the best of all. Denmark has done all the US-led wars of the past 30 years. Actually, in Afghanistan and Iraq, Denmark has the highest per capita casualties of all the NATO allies. So if there's like one ally that the US should thank, it's Denmark, not threat. And so basically here, the situation is this, and Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, she was absolutely clear about that. If the US were to invade or aggressively come to Greenland, that would be the end of all. And she's right. What I mean here is simple. In the Arctic, there's, once again, a framework that the US can use to basically use and leverage Greenland with their partners to secure the Arctic. If the US were to unilaterally try to annex Greenland one way or another, NATO would not help as an organization Greenland or Denmark. But individually, many states would come to Denmark and Greenland's help and support. First of which would be the Nordic states. There's another defense cooperation organism which is called NORDEFCO, which is actually saying, well, it's the 5 Nordic states here we're talking about. They're saying, we're going to go to Greenland and help Greenland because Greenland is not some remote associated territory or whatever. It is integral. It is an integral part of the Nordic Council, the Nordic cooperation area. So basically going to Greenland is just as if the US would be attacking not just Denmark, but the 5 Nordic states altogether.
All right, it's certainly interesting. We'll have to wait and see what happens next. Thank you very much, Mikaa Blugeon-Mered, for your time.